what to do with the anti-defection law. The constitution framers considered a separation of powers. Some people argue that it's bound to happen as we develop, but I don't agree. But bigger challenge, I think, before us today is how India remains a liberal democracy, a democratic republic that our founding fathers conceived us to be. As the legislators from across the country are joined here today in a massive gathering for the first time ever in our country, and perhaps I don't think anywhere else in the developing world such a gathering has ever been put together. I think I must compliment the organizers and Mr. Vishwanath Karad, Rahul Karad, and the entire MIT team, and others who have these senior leaders from the country, the former speakers of the Lok Sabha, who have been kind enough to grace the occasion. The challenges before all of you is how we develop India into a developed country in near future. The dream that our Prime Minister has for India to make India a developed country by 2047, when we celebrate 100 years of our independence. There are challenges. Saying that we'll become a developed country is one thing, but trying to develop the country, go into a trajectory of fast economic growth, and also serve the cause of equity is not very easy. Of course, we all would like India to become prosperous, wealthy, and remove the endemic poverty, the lack of education, the ill health, and all that as soon as possible. But bigger challenge, I think, before us today is how India remains a liberal democracy, a democratic republic that our founding fathers conceived us to be. As we develop, there are challenges, and challenges would be there. Different states could pull in different directions. But the idea of India that was conceived by the founding fathers when we founded the republic, when we wrote our constitution, that India should not be allowed to slip out of our hands. The liberal democracy that we conceived, a secular democracy that we conceived, must be strengthened, because that alone will ensure that India becomes a prosperous country, a developed country in near future. If you lose that dream, if you lose that ideal, then I think mere economic growth rate without equity, without justice, without brotherhood, and without true liberty will be meaningless. We have in the past slipped a little as far as our freedoms are concerned, whether it is a media freedom, whether it's a democratic index. And I think some people argue that it's bound to happen as we develop, but I don't agree. I think we must, while we develop, we must preserve our democratic republic, our secular democracy, freewheeling democracy with its problems and all. But we cannot, in order to achieve faster development, give up this ideal of a democratic republic. There are countries, there are examples in the world where a more authoritarian regimes have developed faster. And we are given examples of East Asian countries, we are given example of China and some other countries. But I would never sacrifice the idea of India that was conceived when our republic was founded. But the dream of being a developed country in a short time is something to be cherished, and I definitely cherish it. You have before you a large agenda. One of the immediate challenges which legislators face today is what to do with the anti-defection law. The anti-defection law, as it was conceived in 1985 by late Rajiv Gandhi, with the particular events happening around us, that served us to some extent. It had faults, and then There was a major overhaul of the anti-defection law in 2003. And we have today the law as it stands, which was amended in 2003. Apparently, that law has not worked. We have seen examples in many state legislatures where there have been rampant defection. Governments have been brought down, new governments have been created. And I think I'll urge you to really introspect and discuss whether there is a need, and as I believe, there's a need to scrap the current version of the anti-defection law and enact something more, which will really not allow defection to happen. There are many suggestions which have been made. I think this is one thing which I think I'll strongly urge that you discuss in the next deliberations for the next 2 days. Another thing I would really ask you to ponder is the Constitution framers considered a separation of powers between the three arms of the government, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. But we don't seem to be anywhere near that ideal. I think the parliament, moment it elects the leader of the largest party, and that leader becomes the prime minister, and he has a cabinet at his disposal and a huge bureaucracy to govern, that executive becomes all powerful, and parliament virtually commits a hierarchy. Parliament cannot legislate itself. Parliament has no role in budget making at all. Parliament cannot disagree with the ruling party whip if they have a different view, or if the electors who are elected them have a different view, they cannot do it. They become really slaves to the whip. This is exactly what was talked of by late Madhu Limaye when the original anti-defection law was being enacted. And he said, please don't do it. The legislatures across the world, very few of them have a law like ours. The United States doesn't have it. England doesn't have it. I think we need to really recorrect the separation of powers and empower the legislature a little more. And one thing to do that will be to eliminate the anti-defection law entirely, so legislatures can act on their own in all matters. In the United States, we know that even the appointment of Supreme Court justices is at the behest of the Congress. The budget is framed by the Congress. The new laws are framed by the Congress, and the president is just given a de facto budget or de facto legislation to work on. I mean, we may not be able to go to that extent today, but I think I'll strongly urge you to consider whether, in today's scenario, legislatures have any role as was conceived when American Constitution was being drafted. The principle of separation of powers between the three wings of the government, I think is not working in India today. The executive has become all too powerful. I mean, even the judiciary has a limited role, but because the appointments ultimately have to be vetted. But particularly how the legislature gets back the power, its teeth, so that what was conceived in the Constitution when it was framed, the three arms of the government should balance each other. There should be checks and balances. It is not happening today. The executives become all too powerful, whether in states or at the central level.